Right on, writers, and welcome first-time viewers to the Books by ADRIAN author platform. This is Typewriters Podcast. Whereas in Livestream Sunday, we got into the career and the books and the writing, journey, as it were. This one is a little bit more about the craft and how we do what we do and why and all that kind of good stuff. More laid back for you guys. So if you love Livestream Sunday, welcome to Typewriters Podcast, where we continue the conversation with this week's guest, Garrett Robinson. I'm going to have him out in just a minute. And like, comment, subscribe, especially if you're on iTunes, subscribe and leave a review. That's the best way to help us to move up in the algorithm and all that kind of good stuff. If you're watching this on YouTube, there should be a live chat going on and I should be in there. So if you have any questions that maybe we didn't get to during this show or the last one, go ahead and ask. If I can answer, I will. And if not, we'll pass the questions along to Mr. Garrett Robinson for a future episode. So welcome everybody. Let's dive right in and get him out here, Mr. Garrett Robinson. Hello.
Yo, what up?
No crackling sounds for you on this one. I apologize.
I was anticipating. My shoulders were just starting to arch up a little bit. Head sinking into my neck.
No, we're just going to keep it nice and cash. Nice. And cash. So... Dude, thank you so much for being on Livestream Sunday. That was a great episode, a great premiere. I had a blast. I was a little worried when I didn't hear from you at first, but it turns out that my email got lost in the spam folder, which tends to happen.
I'm not as into tech stuff, but I've heard that everybody's changed rules on email now, and it does not seem to have reduced the amount of junk mail that I'm getting.
No.
But it has increased the amount of legitimate email that lands in my junk folder, and I'm super annoyed about it.
Yeah, same here, man. Same here. Every once in a while, I just have to go in there and look around and see what I may have missed. Every couple of weeks, I just go in there and dig around because you never know what's in there. I had a notice from my doctor in there, to make an appointment, a very serious one that I needed to make, and I'm like, why is this in my spam folder? It's my doctor. It's ridiculous, especially when it's a reply to an email that we are. It's so annoying. But yes, it's a struggle we're all dealing with these days. Now, on this podcast, we try to get a little into the how of it all. So most of the questions here, it's mostly going to be geared to your way of doing the craft. Every writer does it differently, and I love learning different things that make us all different in how we do it. So one of the first things that we ask around here is plotter, pantser, architect, gardener, that type of thing. Where do you sit, especially with an epic series like what you're doing?
Hardcore plotter. I plot and I plot and I plot. My Underwhelmed novels typically are about 100,000 words long, and the outline, when it's done right before I start writing, is typically about 30,000 words long. I have fairly detailed descriptions of every single scene, including a very summarized version of the dialogue. I'll switch just sort of stream of consciousness back and forth between describing what they're talking about to just actually in the outline writing certain passages of dialogue. If it's just right there already,
it's
like,
the lines came to you
in there. Yeah,
absolutely.
The way that I describe it best is that my outline is like me telling somebody the entire book sitting drinking at a bar. So it's exactly that, where I've broken it down from small to big to big to bigger, and then by the time I'm outlining, I mean, do you want to hear what it sounds like?
Sure.
Okay, let me grab my laptop here.
If you want to share, we're here to hear it.
The outline for my next book, and I'm going to read you a small part. Whatever's on my screen is what I'm going to read you. Aemon meets Enelin to bring her from the palace to a mystic stronghold on the sea. He wonders if they shouldn't bring it, in quotes, to the palace instead. Enelin says no, there's too many watching eyes around. Those eyes might be interested to note the High King stealing out of her home in the middle of the night, but at least they won't know why she left. They travel to a mystic stronghold on the seat. They're holding an artifact. It was brought from Calentin and is on its way to the Ogden Hold. Enelin asks, what is it called again? Eamon goes grim. The Mortiris. She won't say what is it called again because that's so out of style. Like that has nothing to do with the way it's actually going to be written. This is just me, like, you know, again, at a bar with somebody probably talking a little too loud to be heard. So Enelin's like, what's it called again? And Eamon like looks all grim and stuff and goes, the Mortiris. Like, that's how I would explain it to somebody verbally. And then my outline, I've got that on one half of the screen and my manuscript in the other half, and I'm just reading it and then I'm typing it directly into actual prose for the first draft.
I love it. Oh. You dress it all up when you're actually writing it. The outline is just beat for beat, like what's going on.
Exactly. And I get to the outline with, do you know the Snowflake Method?
Yes, I use that in my outlines.
There you go.
And often when I start writing a new chapter, that's usually how I go about it. If if my outline for that chapter is not very dense, I'll use the Snowflake Method to fill it out for sure. Yeah, exactly.
So I swear by it. Yeah, it's really good. It's really good because it does exactly what it says on the tin or in the description, which is that if you have problems with your story idea, you find out very early.
Yeah. I love it because at all stages of it, you have a complete story. Yeah. Whether you have the one sentence, it's a complete story. The 5-sentence first paragraph, complete story. Beginning, middle, to end. You know everything about that story. 5 paragraphs, beginning, middle, and end. You are never without an ending to your story. You always know where you're headed. That's why I love it, because I'm more the gardener versus the architect, where I do plan, I outline, but I leave a lot of room for when I'm actually writing. I'm discovering as I go, and sometimes things will happen in the writing where I'm like, I gotta change the outline. I gotta go because this is better. So I'm gonna go back to the outline. I fix it so that it all is still cohesive and still ends up where I wanted it to end up. I go back into my chapters and I keep it going.
That's actually the wrong word is dichotomy, but I've never heard of that one. The architect versus gardener. That's really cool.
Yeah,
that's a very helpful framework.
So the idea being that the architect has a plan for everything. It sounds very much like you're an architect where you have all the nuts and bolts, all the pieces that you need, you already have by the time you sit down to write the thing. It's already written in your head. You have the plans. You just have to write it. And then
I don't know. I feel more gardener because I do the exact same thing. Yeah, I do the where I need an outline that's going to motivate me to write the story. But it's definitely happened in the middle of a book where I'm like, no, this is going to happen now. Like this has become way more interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and then the idea being that the gardener, the gardener knows that he's planting a tomato, but depending on the conditions and how much sunlight, how much water he gives it, how many nutrients, it's going to be a different tomato every time, bigger, smaller, sweeter, whatever, green, red. It's just the discovery part of it is what I love about it. Oh man, it's the best.
That's awesome. I have a new descriptive term now.
Architect gardener is one that I hear from guys like George R. R. Martin. He's always talking about how he's a gardener, especially when people ask him where the next book is. He's like, hey man, I'm sorry. I'm like, I'm a gardener. Like this, like I'm out there pulling weeds right now. I can't help you. I don't know when it's coming.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense to me too, because the time it takes me to write my books does vary tremendously. Because sometimes that tomato plant shoots right up. And sometimes on my third series, the Tales of the Wanderer, the first book took me I think it was 8 months. The second book the second book took me 3. The third book took me a year and a half.
There it is. There it is. Yeah. This first book for me, this is my 3rd year. I'm coming up on 3 years that I've been working on it. Thankfully, I'm in the final stretches of the editing process, and then I've got critique partners and beta readers after that.
Yeah.
But it's been a long road for this one, and I know, even though I haven't started writing it yet, I know from my outlines that book 2 is even bigger.
Yeah.
And I'm over here thinking like, I'll get it done in 2 years. They're like, no, you won't.
No.
No, you won't. Stop telling people that. That's not going to happen.
Good self-awareness, though. Self-awareness is really, really important. I tell people that you can be almost anything you want to be as long as you are aware that's what you are, and don't try to pretend you're something else.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Yeah, for sure. And that's part of the whole author gig, is kind of figuring out what kind of author you are as well, throughout as you go, not just developing your own style, but like even how you market your stuff and how you put it out and how you title everything. It all comes down to who you are as an author, and you just kind of find it as you go. What was that kind of process like for you? I know you mentioned in Livestream Sunday that you have the publishing house and then the world of your books, Under Realm, and how you had to kind of like use both interchangeably because of whatever. So like, how was that kind of process for you, is like finding your footing with this whole like I'm an author thing,
Yeah. Pursuant to being self-aware, I was very fortunate early on to discover, accept, and become okay with the fact that I'm just a mainstream bitch. Like I'm not I'm never going to be that crazy esoteric guy who introduces people to like the 2 books, the underrated books that I told you about in the live stream show is the deepest esoteric knowledge I have. I'm never going to introduce people to the next cool indie punk band years before they get big or anything like that. Same. My favorite book is of all time is The Lord of the Rings. My favorite movies of all time are the Lord of the Rings films. It's just, I love every single MCU film. I like the good DC cinematic films. I think there's some that I don't like so much, but like, I'm very mainstream. And so I just am sort of like, all right, well, then I'm just going to tell classic stories. That's why I love the Snowflake Method. And then I adapt that actually to from the book Save the Cat, which is a book about screenwriting. I adapt that to I adapt my books to those story beats. And for people who are like, oh, that's so formulaic, I'm like, right. Yeah. Like because that's because it works, because like that's such a good formula. And it's like, well, don't you want to like experiment and like write a Memento or something like that? And I'm like, not really. Like I love that. I love Memento as a movie, but boy, it seems it's so good. It seems like a real chore to write it. And also, I wrote this story where this girl became a thief and fought an evil merchant, and it has 3 acts. And you know what? I like it a lot.
Yeah,
I'm gonna write another one of those.
Dude, when you hear Chris Nolan explain the plot of Memento, I have no problem understanding the plot of Memento until he starts explaining it, and then I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about?" He has like this visual that he puts up on a whiteboard that's like it's like a hairpin, it's like a half oval, and he's like, "So it starts here, and this is the start of the end, but then it ends in the middle, and then like you come this way, and then you have flashback scenes, but then you have other flashback scenes from those flashback scenes." And I'm like, what are you talking about? Writing it does seem like a real chore. I don't want to write Memento for sure. Yeah, me, I'm like that too. Again, the Snowflake Method is a big part of like how I outline, but as far as the story beats, I also subscribe to something. It's not Save the Cat, it's actually the Screenwriter's Bible.
Okay.
My logic behind that is that the best movies, the ones that follow the formula and nail it, right? They have no fat on them. They have 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours tops to tell a compelling story, to make you care about the characters, to make you actually worry about them, to make you theorize about what's coming out. They have to do it all in 2 quick hours. You're in and you're out.
Yeah.
And there's no room for fat on there. Everything needs to matter. Everything needs to get you to the next scene, et cetera, et cetera. So with the Screenwriter's Bible, It gives you 7 turning points, which is like a condensed version of the hero's journey, which is what every plot structure actually is secretly, according to Ken Sean. Every story structure is the hero's journey. So I use that for 2 reasons. That one that I just listed with how it structures your story, but also because I know, like we talked about earlier, that the money isn't so much in the books. If you want the big money, that's in the movies and the TV shows and stuff. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, I want to write novels and I want to be able to just do that and not have a day job. So where's the money going to come from?
Right.
I'll sell the rights to a movie studio. So I write it in a way that is easily adaptable because it's already structured like a movie. On the macro for the book and in the micro for each chapter, you can break each chapter up into an episode of a TV show if you want, and it'll work perfectly with ad breaks and everything. I set it up for you. You don't got to do nothing. Just take the book, put it on the screen. Everybody's going to be happy and back the truck of money up onto my lawn. That's
absolutely 100%. For me, I want to. This is maybe a bit of a tangent, but for me, I want to be the person making the movies because what's funny is I told you in the live stream that I worked in independent film for a while. And to this day, my absolute favorite activity to engage in is directing film. I've done a few shorts and some web stuff and everything like that. And working on a set with a crew and actors is the greatest high that I've ever had in my life. I love it. It's also, I mean, if you think that traditional publishing is a tough industry to break into, holy crap. Film in general is tough, but I could easily have just had a job and a career as a on-set sound guy because I had years of experience in a studio and I was really good on set and people just kept hiring me, but I was like, I don't want to be doing that. I want to direct. And so I did the classic thing of trying to write my own projects to then direct, but still you need to get funding. You need to build, your connections and everything like that. And it was a friend of mine who was, getting involved in sort of the self-publishing evolution, who said, well, if you publish your stories as books and you had the rights to them, then that could be how that started. Is either have your own money for like your first small projects, and you fund them yourself, or you're able to go, hey, I have this popular book series that I own the rights to. I want to direct it. So that is the long goal for me. The books are there being written by a whole host of people, and that's just continuing on forward. And then I step aside and jump back to the beginning of it all and start directing the Nightblade movies or TV shows or something like that. And I'm imagining, of course, that there's going to be some other smaller projects in there to like fully build my chops and put together a reel and be like, no, this guy can actually do this. But that's the greatest thing for me. So just exactly like you, I'm writing with all of that in mind for the future, but with the idea that I'm the person who's going to be like, all right, I got to turn this shit into a script now.
See, that's for me. I want to be a showrunner. I want to someday run a writer's room, run a show, and like you, I have my eye on that prize in the far future. So that even the whole idea of like, sell the rights to a studio to make a movie, that's all part of it too, because it's just like, because maybe with that money I can fund my own production of this other thing.
Totally.
And dude, it's all pie in the sky dreams right now, but totally doable, I think.
Yeah. And totally in the meantime, we're writing books. It's so cool,
dude. It's the coolest thing. Like, people don't get it. People don't get how hard it is, how long it takes, and how absolutely thrilling and fun it is. Like, they really, I could write a book if I had time. I'm like, bro.
Okay.
Bro.
Sure, you could.
so sure.
My kid could write a book too.
If he had sure. If we all had time. Like, of course. 100 monkeys with a typewriter can write a book.
Exactly.
Give them enough time. They'll give you Shakespeare, apparently. Yeah, man. Was there anything, I love asking this, was there anything that you wanted to talk about on Livestream Sunday today that we maybe didn't get to in the time allotted?
Oh man. I mean, okay, so I don't know how relevant this is craft wise, but just in terms of writing and career and stuff, I do like to talk about for lack of a better term, I do like to talk about, I guess, sort of activism
Sure.
or being sort of a, I don't know. I guess I just feel like there is an impulse in fans of, but then also creators of entertainment, whether it's books, movies, or TV or something like that,
Mm.
to be like well, that should always be separate from the real world or what you believe in. Or I'm very outspoken on my YouTube channel and on all my social media about what I believe in politically. And that gets me called all sorts of things, you know, like a SJW and all that sort of stuff. And I'm just like, whatever, man. I mean, in terms of
The world we
insults,
live
that's
in now, man.
yeah, it's crazy. In terms of insults, it's just like that's the worst one ever I've ever heard of. I'm a warrior for social justice. You got, boy, do I feel
Got me
bad
right
now.
where it hurts.
But like sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna agree with you that it's just like when, you know, these idiots on TV talk about woke culture as if
Yeah.
it's a horrible thing, and I'm like, do you understand the concept of that word? Like, first of all, it's a ridiculous word to begin with, but the idea behind it
Yeah.
is that you want to be a good person, and
Exactly.
you're using it like it's a slur. Like, you
Yeah.
don't get it, dude.
Yeah. No, it's wild to me, and I think that it's a thing that I've worked really hard to instill in from the beginning, from the ground up, because what you do see is you see big storytellers and or studios or whatever who are now trying to pivot or course correct. And it is very hard. It's hard for them to take this huge structure and this big thing that they've been doing for so long and now try to be more inclusive, because, you know, like in many cases they're just already a club of the same sort of homogenized group of people, and now they're trying to, you know, be a little different or be a little bit more, and like it ends up with, you know, like tokenism or just sort of like a very forced feeling thing. And I see that from the outside. I do appreciate that they are making the effort. That is better than not making the effort. Absolutely. But I'm just like, that's rough. So
it is a double-edged sword for them, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of a lose-lose situation, as you say. Like, it's great that they're putting in the effort. Is it too little, too late? Like, you know, that kind of thing. It's one of those things that people are like, okay, but where was this, you know, 20 years ago? So like, I totally get that. One of the things with me, you know, I come from a Christian upbringing, and there was a lot of weight to kind of unpack, you know, in your adulthood and stuff like that. One of the things that I did with this novel was, in anything that I do, I try to set it up to challenge myself. I try to paint myself into a corner and tell myself, all right, figure it out, stupid. You know? And so one of the things that I did was, you learn very quickly when you start writing that research is a huge part of it. Yeah. And, you know, I'm a person who's always considered himself an ally and all that kind of stuff, but it, you know, put your money where your mouth is, right? Yeah. So instead of like using my platform to talk about whatever, I'm like, I'm going to put it in my books. Yeah. So, you know, I've been a stoner for years. There's drug culture in my books. Hey, you know, I have plenty of people in my life, in my circles, who are gay, lesbian, polyamorous, etc. Yeah. I put, you know, LGBTQ characters as main characters because now I have to put myself in their shoes. Right. And I have to do the research to figure out how to best write that kind of character and how to not be the dum-dum that just does, you know, the whatever, you know, the bare minimum whatever and just tries to skate by with it. Like, no, like I want people to come out of this going, this was a great fucking book. Did a gay person write this? No. Cisgendered, you know, straight male with 2 kids wrote that.
I think that's totally awesome. I think that's great. And that is one reason that was the primary impetus behind me starting Legacy Books and going from me to Underrealm being the collaborative thing, is that and I don't think that this is a thing that everybody needs to do or needs to worry about necessarily.
Follow your own path. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. But like, people were like, okay, so it's really cool seeing people on the page. I'd like to see more people behind the keyboard. And I was like, that's a good point. And I was already thinking of it being a multi-author endeavor, again, very much like Marvel, but with Marvel and other things like DC and everything like that, again, if you've built from the ground up a club of one type of person who's your default, then it's so much harder to shift away from that. And so I was, all right, so for the first novels that I published, for the stories, the short stories and everything like that, I'm going to try to put that diversity and representation behind the keyboard straight from the get-go, so that is the default. And of course, anybody can come in and write, but I want to make a conscious effort, because if you're not making a conscious effort, you're playing into the unconscious standards and sort of like biases of the society you're in. And so it's just, even like a little bit of leaning and course correction is just a thing that you can do that really isn't that hard, that makes the world better. Yeah. And I think that that's something that is worth every author, artist, whatever they're doing, it's worth thinking about it, because it's just something that you can do, because it's very easy to feel overwhelmed by whatever you think is wrong with the world. Everybody has their own view of what's wrong with it. It's regardless, it's very easy to feel overwhelmed and feel like you can't do anything about it. Well, you can't do everything about it. You can't fix it right by yourself, but you can do something
in your own life, in your own circles, in your own space. You can just do your share
a little bit. Yeah.
You don't need to, have a huge platform. You don't need to, go to a rally or whatever. Like, you don't have to put yourself in danger. You can just live according to what you believe is correct.
Exactly.
And just represent, man. Just like show up every day and represent.
Totally. 100%. So I think that's a thing that people should be more willing to explore. I get the impulse to just be like, you know what, that's real life, and I want to leave that over here, and I just want to do my thing without thinking about any of it. I get it, but I want people to think with the other option more.
Especially in fantasy, it's supposed to be escapism. You're supposed to be able to leave the worries of your world behind. Absolutely. But there's a balance to everything.
Yeah.
And the balance comes in, especially for me, and it sounds like for you as well, character comes first. Yeah. And, every story, every plot, every world, it all comes down to, do I care about the characters that I am reading about?
Right.
And so, like you can want the escapism all day, but if your characters don't feel real, if they're not relatable, then people aren't going to like your story.
Yeah.
So like, at least your characters should reflect the world around you. Again, even if it's fantasy, if it's set in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, there's probably gay people in that galaxy.
Exactly. And one thing I love, which I tried very hard to do in my books, and I've actually established this not as like a rule, but as like a guiding principle for other people who write in it as well, is for one thing, I don't particularly want to profit off of stories of other people's like oppression or so I just love just having people of identities that are marginalized in our world, in this world, but that's not what the story is about. They are Lauren is bi, for example. But that's not a struggle for her. She doesn't live in a society that people aren't trying to kill her for that. They're trying to kill her because she stole money from them. And it's like, and that I think lends itself to that escapism, because I think it can be so tremendously valuable to have those stories where that is the focus, right? Like if somebody wants to write about like discrimination that they faced growing up, That's so valuable because that helps explain it to people who haven't gone through that. And then on the other side of the coin, it's also valuable to just be like, hey, you're here, you're queer, nobody cares. They want you to go on an adventure and save the world because you're a hero. And that identity is just part of who you are rather than the enemy you have to defeat in this story. And that's another option that just I don't see a lot of people. Some people talk about it and they're like, well, if I make a, or it happens with racial stuff too. If I make a gay character or a black character, then the story becomes about that. I'm like, no, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
If it does, that's because you made it about that. They can just exist.
Anytime people say something like that to me, I always have one book that I point out. It's do I have it here? I do not have it here. It's Luther. The show Luther on the BBC, starring Idris Elba.
I don't.
It's a cop show. It's like a detective hunting serial killers kind of cop show, and it was Idris Elba before he was huge. It's like the thing that made him a household name. It's a BBC show. Great. I highly recommend it. The creator of that show wrote a novel about that character. The first episode of that series, the very first scene, begins with Luther catching a serial killer he's been hunting for a long time. Mm-hmm. And it was a very taxing case, and it's really broken him down. And so like there's a big time jump between the moment where he catches this guy and the first new case of the series. So it's kind of like this little prologue-y kind of thing that happens in that episode. The novel is that case, so it's a prequel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Idris Elba, a very large, very handsome black man.
Mm-hmm.
In the book, written well after the show was created and well after everybody knows Luther as Idris Elba, the only description of that character anywhere in that novel is Luther, a big man with a big walk. That's his description. And regardless of what his voice is like in the dialogue, which if you watch the show, you're hearing Idris Elba, it sounds like a big, tall black man who's talking to you with a very deep voice. All of that is there and it totally rings true. But if you had never seen the show before, you would have no idea that the character was black. That's my proof. I always just put that in people's faces right there. Like, there you go. There it is. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can 100%. Just make the character that because there's people like that. They
totally. Exist. Yeah, exactly. I think that's a thing that is just another one of those things that's good to put in people's awareness, just to let people know that that's an option. Let it percolate. Nobody has to do anything that they don't want to. We're not talking about forcing anybody to write any kind of story that they don't want to, because people get defensive when you talk about this. They get really
trying to
defensive.
Force me to do what? No,
right? And it's like, no. I just want people to know it is an option because people don't really.
Yeah,
it's wild.
We have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you two questions that we ask every author on this podcast, because everybody has a different opinion on these two things. The first one is writer's block. Do you get it? Do you even believe in it? Some of us don't. If you do get it, how do you battle it, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, for me, what manifests as quote unquote writer's block, which I don't use quotes to say that I don't believe in it. I do. But for me, it is the rest of my life interfering. It's my wife, my 3 kids, whatever else is going on in my life that makes it so that I can't write. I used to beat myself up about it really hard, was like, you're not writing, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. And I went, from 2019 to 2020, my writing productivity dropped off tremendously. And I still struggle with this because I was
when we all had the most time to write.
Exactly. That's what I was kicking myself for. I was like, you're stuck at home all the time. Yeah. Why aren't you? And it's like, because life, man, because you're freaked and stressed and your kids are home all the time. Do you want to be somebody who just that strange figure in their lives who exists in that room that we're not allowed to go into? No. Right. So you have to be gentle with yourself and accepting. You sometimes what I need is that kick in the pants. It's like, okay, you're maybe screwing around a little too much. You're maybe going and playing like more D&D than you should. You maybe could spend more time writing. But then on the other side of things, you have to be like, you've got a family member who's going through a health thing right now. The world is in a global pandemic. Stuff is going on. Be gentle with yourself. So that is what writer's block is to me. I never ever sit down at my desk and am unable to start putting words down. And I know that even if I put bad words down now, I'm going to turn them into good words later. So that form of writer's block doesn't exist for me. But if somebody is struggling with, they sit down at the laptop or the computer and they can't put the words down, it's very possible that it's just that there's something else that's going on in your life that maybe needs your attention before you're ready to do that. That's sort of my vague idea of writer's block as a subject.
It's actually very good advice. You know, a lot of times folks will come on here and say that, and I agree with them, of course, that this is sometimes the case where you sit down and the words don't come out. If you're writing a particular project, maybe you need to go back to your outline. Maybe there's something wrong in the narrative. Maybe you took a wrong turn somewhere, and you got to maybe delete a couple of chapters. Maybe even I don't know, but something is wrong somewhere. Go back, find the point where you're comfortable with everything, and then start again from there. For me. For me, it's usually that either I need to go back to my outline, something's wrong, or I do feel some sort of like blockage and I have to like create a scenario for me to break through it. You know, stream of consciousness writing, put on a timer, keep the keys clacking, writing complete gibberish and nonsense. Doesn't matter. Just keep it going until that alarm goes off. By the end of it, you've written something and you kind of like got the water flowing or whatever. But you know, it's I want to say that I don't believe in it, but it does hit me sometimes. The other one is imposter syndrome. You know, what is that like for you? How do you kind of deal with imposter syndrome when it lurks its ugly head?
Okay, so welcome to the question that makes me sound like the douchiest person in the world. Don't know her. I don't know her because, like, you know, I just. I was raised to have an unjustifiably high opinion of myself. Just how I was raised. My parents told me that I was an only child. You know, growing up, I was richer than anybody should be. My parents were super rich. They lost it all when I was like 14 or 15. But I grew up a rich white man, only child, doted on by two incredible, loving parents who were nothing but supportive and wonderful in every single thing that I ever wanted to do. I had to, in my teenage years, have people go, "Hey man, you are not perfect." And I was like, sounds fake. Right. Like, I had to do some major ego checking in the time. And I like, there's something to be said for having your family's fortunes like absolutely tank and toilet out, because I would probably be way douchier than I am right now if I hadn't had that major reality check. You know, the Academy journals, which we talked about in the live stream, and the extreme privilege that Eben grew up with that he is having to unlearn is deeply delving into my own life experience.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And so when people are like, I don't know, I don't feel like what I wrote is good enough. And I'm like, that sucks.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I'm self-aware enough to know that I've never written any prose as good as Martin or Tolkien or Jordan, but I'm like, that's not what I'm going for. And I know that I've never written characters as compelling as like my favorite characters from my favorite books, but I'm just building these stories that I think are really fun. And I still read all my books, and I'm like, I read, you know, one chapter and it just passes me by. And then I read another chapter and I'm like, that's actually pretty good. I like that one. People are like, it's, so if I have anything to say about imposter syndrome, take it with a grain of salt, because I'm not somebody who has it. But the thing that I will say is that it's not fair or right that the crappiest, worst people who exist in the world, the truly bad, evil people who are out there in the world, think really highly of themselves, and you do not. Not you, the
The
royal,
royal you, sure.
whoever is going through imposter syndrome. You are a better person than so many terrible people out there, and you are a better writer and artist than so many really, really bad artists and writers out there who think they're great. So
Yeah.
to a degree, this also is a product of growing up in Los Angeles, to a degree, fake it till you make it. Just pretend you think that your work is good and worth continuing. And eventually you hopefully will actually believe it. But even if you never come to believe that yourself, you will still be putting work out there in the world, and that will be important to someone. That will be really vitally important to somebody. You will help them. You might change their life or help them survive a situation that they might not have survived. They might come and tell you that, and you might not believe them. You might be, well, it wasn't my work that did that. It was you did. It doesn't matter if you believe them. Take your ego out of it. You need to tell yourself that your work is good enough to continue in order for it to help people. So just keep going. Keep going anyway. I don't care if you don't think you're good enough. Somebody else needs what you're doing right now. I don't care what it is. I don't know what it is. Somebody else needs it. Who cares if you don't like it?
Yeah. You know, because it rings so true, because you're sitting there talking about how you don't feel like you write as compelling characters as your favorite characters in literature and all that kind of stuff. But as you were saying it, I'm sitting here going, yeah, but your characters are that for somebody else.
Exactly.
They may not be that for you, but they're that for somebody else. And, you know, I'm going to sound like a complete broken record for anyone who has heard any episode of this podcast before, because I've said this a million times, but I believe that imposter syndrome, at least for authors, excuse me, is a bit of a misunderstanding of something that's part of being at least a new author, which is, you know, imposter syndrome happens especially when you feel like, oh, I'm just writing like, I'm trying to write like Tolkien, or I'm trying to write like Gaiman, or I'm trying, you know, like it's clear to me that I'm just trying to be these other writers. Right. And, you know, every well accomplished writer will tell you the exact same thing: steal from everybody.
Yeah.
All of your favorite writers, all that great stuff that you love that they do that. You love how epic Gaiman's fantasies are, right? Epic fantasies like Gaiman. You love, you know, the internal dialogue or internal monologue of George Martin's characters. Do that. Put that in your, like, just steal from all the people that you love the best, because that's how you develop your own style. Like, they didn't just come up with that. They stole from a bunch of other people and made their own style, etc. So you're not an imposter. You're just figuring it out.
Totally.
Keep going.
Yeah, none of them. Tolkien never got why people liked Lord of the Rings as much as they did. I
Isn't
guarantee.
that hilarious?
Yeah, I guarantee Martin is like, well, I mean, I like the books, but some of you people are crazy. And like, you'll be somebody else's Martin, and you will read your own book, and you'll be like, it's fine, I guess. But then you'll look at somebody who is dressed up as your character and got a tattoo of a quote, and you'll be like, I mean, I'm fine with the book, but you're crazy, man.
If I go to a con and somebody's dressed up as my favorite character, I'm gonna lose my shit.
Yo. I cheated. I actually commissioned and hired a cosplayer to do Lauren one time because I couldn't wait anymore. I was like, no.
It's not a bad idea. I tried to do something similar once. You know, before I started writing this novel, I was working on a graphic novel with some friends of mine that never actually got finished, because while we wrote the plot in a writer's room type situation, it came down to me to write the scripts, and I just wasn't a good enough writer yet. And I spent like years just turning wheels trying to get these scripts to a point where I can be proud of them and they could be proud of them. And ultimately I was like, I need to actually earn my stripes as a writer. I can't do this yet. But one of the things that we did in that series was we cast one of my real life friends as one of the main characters in the book. Her name, her likeness, everything, even her real world occupation. In our
That's
story, one of the big villains was the Secretary of State, and there's a whole political thing going on. So our point of view character there was the Deputy Secretary of State. She's not the Deputy Secretary of State in the real world, but she works for the State Department.
Yeah.
She works in that world. And she was going to look exactly like the character in the book, so that if we did go to cons and I had my friend at my table with the little pin on the thing, and
that's the character.
Yeah, that's her. And people will walk up and have the comic and see her and freak out, and it would have been so good. It never happened. But so cool. Someday. Mr. Robinson, thank you so very much for doing both of my shows today. This was fan-freaking-tastic. I had a blast. I can't wait to have you on again. Thank you so much for kicking off the season in such style and grace. Thank you so much.
My total pleasure.
For everyone out there, if you want more from Mr. Robinson, he has his own YouTube channel. Link is in the description down below.
It's sporadic. Fair warning. I'm not as disciplined as
I've
seen
some action. I've seen some action on your channel. Like you were doing some stuff recently. I saw some stuff.
Yeah, it's sporadic. It's sporadic. It's always writing first. And if I have time, I put up a video.
Hey, man, if there's ever a quote to go by and end on, is writing first. Absolutely. That's right. Like, comment, subscribe, everybody. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys Sunday for the next episode of Livestream Sunday. Mr. Garrett Robinson, thank you again. Have a great one. And right on, writers. We out.